Your support keeps these stories alive. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell.
My name is Thomas. I am 36 years old, and if there is one thing I never thought I would say, it's this. My own parents believed I was a violent man because of lies my brother spread. Growing up, I always thought family was unshakable. My younger brother, Eric, and I were only 2 years apart. We shared a bedroom, fought over toys, played baseball in the backyard. Like most siblings, we argued, sometimes fiercely, but we always came back to each other in the end. At least, that's what I believe. As we grew older, our paths diverged. I worked hard, studied, and landed a steady job in construction management. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work that put food on the table. Eric, on the other hand, drifted. He bounced from one job to another, always quitting when things got tough. He had a temper, quick to blame others for his failures. But despite everything, I still had his back. He was my brother. The turning point came when Eric moved back in with our parents after another failed job. At first, I didn't think much of it. I was busy with my own life, my own bills, my own struggles. But soon I noticed something strange. My calls with mom and dad grew colder. Their voices were tight, cautious, as though they were hiding something. Then came the night that shattered everything. I went over for Sunday dinner, like I had done 100 times before. The house smelled of roast chicken, but the warmth I remembered was gone. My mother barely looked at me. My father's jaw was tight, his eyes hard. Eric sat smugly at the table, his arms crossed. "What's going on?" I asked, confused by the heavy silence. Why father cleared his throat. His voice was sharp. "Thomas, we need to talk. Eric told us about the way you've been treating him." I frowned. "What are you talking about?" My mother finally looked at me, her eyes filled with something that cut me deeper than anger, disappointment. "He says you've been violent, that you shoved him, threatened him, that you've always had a temper." The words knocked the breath out of me. I stared at Eric, waiting for him to laugh, to admit it was a joke taken too far. But instead, he leaned back in his chair, smirking. "That's right," he said smoothly. "You've always been like this, Tom. You think you're better than me, always looking down on me. You've hit me before, and you know it." My chest tightened. "That's a lie. I've never laid a hand on you in my life." But my parents didn't believe me. I could see it in their eyes, the doubt, the suspicion. My father shook his head. "We've seen your temper, Thomas. You yell, you slam doors, you throw things when you're angry. Don't pretend you're innocent." I felt the ground beneath me crumble. Yes, I had a temper. I raised my voice sometimes, slammed a door or two when frustration boiled over. But violence? Never. Not once did I try to explain, my voice breaking. "Dad, Mom, please. You know me. You raised me." I never hurt him. He's twisting things because he can't take responsibility for his own mess. But the damage was already done. Eric's lies had sunk their claws deep, poisoning their trust. My mother's lips trembled as she whispered, "I don't know what to believe anymore." That night, I left the house with my heart in pieces. My parents, the two people who had known me my entire life, looked at me as though I were a stranger. And my brother, the boy I once shared a room with, had just destroyed me with words as sharp as knives as I sat in my car outside their house, hands trembling on the steering wheel. One truth became painfully clear. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was war, and my brother had declared it. In the weeks that followed that Sunday dinner, my life began to unravel in ways I couldn't have imagined. It started with small things, almost invisible at first. A missed call from my mother, a text from my father that was unusually short and formal. The warmth of family that had always been there, even in our toughest times, was suddenly gone. Then came the whispers. An old family friend bumped into me at the hardware store. He gave me a strange look before muttering, "I hope you get the help you need, Tom." I stood there stunned, a box of screws in my hand, wondering what he meant. The answer came that night when I checked my voicemail. There were two messages from cousins I rarely spoke to. One said, "I heard about the anger issues, man. You got to calm down before someone gets hurt." The other was harsher. "If you ever lay a hand on your brother again, don't expect us to stay quiet." My stomach dropped. Eric had gone further than I thought possible. He wasn't just feeding lies to our parents. He was spreading them to the entire family that I tried to call him, my hands shaking with fury. When he finally picked up, his voice was calm, almost smug. Eric, what the hell are you telling people? I demanded. He chuckled. Only the truth, Tom. Everyone knows you've got a temper. I'm just making sure they're aware of what you're capable of. You're lying, I shouted, my chest burning. You know damn well I've never touched you. Calm down, he said mockingly. You're proving my point right now. Always so angry, always ready to explode. Why do you think Mom and Dad believe me? His words were like poison in my veins. For the first time in my life, I realized just how dangerous Eric could be. He wasn't just careless, he was calculated. He was painting a picture of me that would be impossible to erase. Soon, the fallout spread to my work. My supervisor called me into his office one morning, concern etched on his face. Tom, I don't know what's going on in your personal life, but I've had a couple of phone calls. People saying you've got violent tendencies. Is there anything you need to tell me? I sat there stunned, my career now dangling on the edge because of my brother's lies. I managed to convince my boss that it was nothing more than family drama, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. The seed had been planted. Nights became unbearable. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. I replayed every moment of my childhood with Eric, wondering how the boy I once played baseball with had turned into this. My mind kept going back to one thought: why? Why would he do this to me? The answer came when I visited my parents again, desperate to clear my name. That we sat in the living room, the air thick with tension. Mom, Dad, please. You know me. You raised me. Have I ever raised a hand to anyone in this family? My mother's eyes filled with tears. We've seen your anger, Thomas. We've seen how you shout, how you slam doors. We can't just ignore what Eric is saying. I turned to my father, hoping for reason. Dad, you know me. You know I'd never hurt anyone. Why are you believing him over me? My father's voice was low, heavy. Because he came to us broken, Tom. He was terrified, said you threatened him. Do you expect us to ignore our own son when he's scared? He's not scared, I shouted, my hands trembling. He's lying, and you're letting him destroy me. Eric, who had been sitting quietly in the corner, finally spoke, his voice dripping with false vulnerability. I didn't want to say anything, Tom, but you left me no choice. I was afraid of what you'd do if I stayed silent. That was the moment I lost it. Not violently, not the way he painted me, but emotionally. I stood, my chest heaving, my vision blurred with tears. You're tearing this family apart, Eric. And one day, everyone will see the truth. But by then, it might be too late. I stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind me. And as I drove away, the awful reality settled in. My brother had poisoned the well. No matter what I said, no matter what I did, the people who mattered most already saw me as guilty. For the first time in my life, I realized I was completely alone. For weeks, I tried to keep my head down, to stay calm, to prove by my actions that Eric's stories were nothing but lies. But the harder I tried to live normally, the more I realized the damage was already done. Everywhere I went, I felt eyes on me. At family gatherings, cousins avoided me. At work, conversations stopped when I entered the break room. Even in my own neighborhood, people seemed to watch me differently, like I was a man carrying a loaded gun under his jacket. It all came to a head one Saturday afternoon. My mother called and asked me to come over to help with some yard work. For a moment, I thought it might be a peace offering, a chance to mend things. I was wrong. When I arrived, Eric was already there. He stood in the driveway, arms crossed, smirk plastered across his face. My parents were on the porch, watching like nervous referees before a fight. That I grabbed the rake leaning against the garage and started working, trying to ignore him. But Eric wouldn't let me. He followed me around the yard, his voice low enough that only I could hear. You know, he whispered, they'll never believe you. You can scream all you want, but to them you're the violent one now. I've already won. My grip on the rake tightened. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. Why are you doing this, Eric? Why? We're brothers. He laughed, a cruel sound. Because you've always thought you were better than me. The good son, the hard worker, the one Dad respects. I'm done being in your shadow. I turned to face him, my chest burning. So you'd rather destroy me than deal with your own failures? That's your answer. He stepped closer, his smirk widening. It's working, isn't it? Look around. Mom and Dad don't trust you. Everyone thinks you're dangerous. I don't even have to lift a finger, but doing all the work for me. I could feel my blood boiling, my fists clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms. For one terrifying second, I wanted to hit him, not because his lies were true, but because they weren't, and he knew it, because he was ripping apart the only family I had. And that's when it hit me. If I lost control, even for one moment, he would win. That's exactly what he wanted. Proof. A reason for everyone to say, "See, we told you Thomas is violent." I dropped the rake, my hands shaking. "You're sick," I said, my voice trembling with rage I couldn't release. "You're not just lying. You're trying to push me until I become the monster you've invented." My parents rushed over, alarmed by the raised voices. My mother's eyes darted between us, wide with fear. "What's going on here?" Before I could answer, Eric threw his hands up dramatically. "See? He's losing it again." He was about to come at me. My father grabbed my arm, holding me back even though I hadn't moved toward Eric. His grip was firm, his voice sharp. "Enough, Thomas. We've had enough of this anger." My chest heaved as I stared at them, disbelief and pain crashing together inside me. "Are you serious? You believe him over me again? You think I would actually hurt my own brother?" Eric stood behind them, smiling triumphantly, like a magician who had just pulled off his greatest trick that I couldn't take it anymore. I pulled my arm free and shouted, "One day you'll see the truth. One day you'll realize who's been lying this whole time. But by then, it'll be too late." I stormed off, my vision blurred with tears of fury and heartbreak. Behind me, I could hear my mother sobbing, my father calling after me, and Eric's quiet laughter. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the cracks in the ceiling. I had never felt so trapped. If I defended myself, I looked guilty. If I stayed quiet, the lies spread. Eric had built a cage of words around me, and no matter what I did, everyone saw me through the bars. For the first time in my life, I began to wonder if the only way forward was to let go of them all. My brother, my parents, the family I had fought so hard to hold on to. Because if blood could betray you this deeply, what was left to fight for? After that confrontation in my parents' yard, I swore to myself I wouldn't give Eric what he wanted. He thrived on my anger. He needed me to explode so he could point and say, "See, that's the violent man I told you about." But the more I resisted, the more suffocating the lies became. For a while, it felt like Eric was untouchable. He strutted around family gatherings like a man who had just won a war, telling his stories with the confidence of someone who believed no one would ever challenge him. My parents hovered around him protectively, convinced he was the wounded one, the victim. But lies have a way of cracking when you lean on them too hard. And Eric was leaning with all his weight. That IT started small. A cousin who lived nearby mentioned to me privately, "You know, Eric told me you broke his arm once when you were teenagers." My jaw dropped. Eric never had a broken arm in his life. I asked her when it supposedly happened, and her story didn't even line up with reality. She claimed it was during a summer when Eric had actually been away at camp. That was the first thread. Then more began to unravel. One evening, my father called me, his voice quieter than usual. "Thomas, Eric says you threatened him last night. Said you showed up at his place, banging on the door. Is that true?" I froze. "Dad, I was at work until 10, and then home the rest of the night. Do you want my timesheets? Security camera footage from my building?" There was silence on the other end of the line. For the first time, I heard doubt, not aimed at me, but at Eric. Days later, the breaking point came. Eric was drunk at a local bar, running his mouth louder than usual. A friend of mine happened to be there and overheard him bragging. "It's easy," Eric slurred. "Everyone thinks Thomas is the hothead, so I just tell them he snapped. They eat it up, Mom and Dad. They'll believe anything if it makes me look like the victim." My friend recorded it. He sent me the audio that night. When I pressed play, my stomach twisted. Hearing Eric's voice admitting the truth was like a knife in my chest and a bomb on my soul at the same time that I took it straight to my parents. We sat in their living room, the air heavy with unspoken tension. My mother looked at me with weary eyes. "Thomas, why are you here?" "Because you need to hear something," I said, my hands shaking as I pulled out my phone. "And after this, you'll never be able to say you didn't know the truth." I played the recording. Eric's voice filled the room. Everyone thinks Thomas is the hothead. Mom and Dad will believe anything if it makes me look like the victim. The color drained from my mother's face. My father's jaw tightened. For the first time in months, I saw the doubt shift away from me and onto Eric. "Where did you get this?" my father asked, his voice low. "A friend recorded it at the bar." "Dad, he admitted it. He's been lying to you, to everyone, just to tear me down." Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. My mother's eyes brimmed with tears, but she said nothing. My father stood, pacing the room, his hands clenched. When Eric walked in later that evening, the atmosphere was electric. He looked at us, suspicious, his smirk faltering. "What's going on?" My father turned on him, his voice booming. "Enough, Eric. We know." For once, Eric's mask slipped. His eyes darted to me, then back to them. "What do you mean?" "He's lying again." My father slammed his hand on the table, startling us all. "We heard the recording. Your own words. You've been lying this whole time." Eric froze. His face twisted between fury and panic. Then, as he always did, he tried to wriggle free. "I was drunk, Dad. I didn't mean it. You know how Thomas gets. I just exaggerated." But the damage was done. The doubt that had shielded him for so long was gone. My mother's tears spilled over, her voice trembling. "Eric, how could you? You turned us against your own brother." He shouted, cursed, tried to twist it back on me, but it was too late. The truth was out that I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt tired of fighting, tired of trying to prove who I was to people who should have known me better than anyone. That night, as I drove home, the weight on my chest was different. Lighter, in a way, but still heavy. Because even though the lies had been exposed, the scars they left behind wouldn't disappear overnight. Trust, once broken, doesn't return easily. For the first time, though, I allowed myself to hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, my parents would finally see me for who I really was. Not the monster Eric had painted, but the son they had raised. In the days after Eric's lies finally collapsed, I expected to feel triumphant. After all the months of being painted as a violent man, of having my own parents look at me like a stranger, I thought the truth would come like a flood of relief. Instead, it came like rain on cracked soil. Welcome, yes, but too late to make anything bloom right away. Why parents didn't apologize right away. How could they? The shame was too heavy. My mother avoided my eyes when we spoke, her voice trembling every time she tried to ask how I was. My father, proud and stubborn as ever, buried himself in silence. I could see it written all over him, the guilt of believing the wrong son. And yet, words of regret stuck in his throat. I wasn't angry at them anymore, not really. I was disappointed, because the truth was they should never have doubted me in the first place. They had known me for 36 years. They had seen me at my best, and my worst, and everywhere in between. And still, they had let Eric's lies worm their way deeper than decades of truth. Eric, of course, didn't vanish quietly. He raged when confronted, then disappeared for a while, only to resurface with half-hearted excuses. "I was drunk," he said. "I was just jealous," he muttered. But none of it mattered anymore. The trust was gone. The brotherhood we once had, the late-night talks as kids, the baseball games in the backyard, the laughter we shared, was dead. He had killed it with his own hands, and no apology could bring it back. That I kept my distance. For weeks, I didn't go to my parents' house. When I finally did, I noticed a change. They were quieter, more careful with their words. They tried to cook my favorite meal, like they had when I was a teenager, as though chicken and mashed potatoes could cover up the scars. We sat around the table, and though the food was warm, the air was cold with what had been lost. At one point, my father finally spoke, his voice rough. "We should have trusted you." It wasn't an apology, not fully, but it was a crack in the wall of pride. And for me, it was enough, but I also knew something fundamental had shifted. My parents and I would go on, but things would never be the same. That bond of blind trust had been shattered, and in its place stood something more fragile, more cautious. Maybe in time it would grow stronger, or maybe it would always remain cracked. Only time would tell. That as for Eric, I stopped waiting for him to change. I stopped waiting for him to be the brother I once thought he was. Some people thrive on chaos, on manipulation, on dragging others down so they don't have to climb themselves. And sometimes those people are the ones closest to you. That realization hurt, but it also freed me. Because I finally understood that blood alone doesn't make someone your family. Loyalty does. Respect does. Truth does. And Eric had none of those things to give point one evening. I sat on my porch watching the sunset bleed across the sky, and I thought about everything that had happened. The lies, the betrayal, the shame, the moment of vindication. And I realized something. This wasn't just a story about my brother tearing me down. It was a story about me learning to stand tall, even when the people I loved most doubted me. Yes, it left scars. Yes, it broke something in me that may never fully heal, but also gave me strength I didn't know I had. The strength to walk through whispers, to face accusations, to hold on to the truth, even when no one else believed I teed it. In the end, my brother lost far more than I did. He lost the trust of our parents, the respect of our family, and whatever shred of brotherhood we once shared. I lost illusions, yes, but I gained clarity, and maybe that's the only way to survive betrayal this deep. Not by pretending it never happened, not by waiting for everything to go back to the way it was, but by building something stronger from the ruins. As the last light of the day faded, I whispered to myself, I know who I am. No lie, no rumor, no jealous brother could ever take that away again.